Hello, welcome to our newest live stream. This is episode 197 of Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. I'm Marcy Larson, Andy's mom. And with me, as always, my live stream partner, Gwen. And Gwen is
Hello.
waving to
Yep.
those of you on that are just listening. That was a wave from
Right.
Gwen.
Yes. Good evening.
Uh, but I do want to say that we were supposed to have a third person on, Jami, and we were very excited about it. And Jami's very excited about it. And guess what? Jami is in the middle of a hailstorm in California, and her internet is out. And the phone is actually not reliable. So we've tried talking on the phone several times. We did get through one time, but it's not reliable and not good enough to have her try to participate in any capacity right now. So Gwen and I are going to kind of wing it and be on our own. And then we're going to make this a little bit short. And when Jami has her internet back within the next couple of days, I'm going to just record just without anyone else listening, without it being a live stream, record that and then add that into Thursday's podcast. So you'll have Gwen and I just for about a half an hour today, and then probably another half an hour with Jami, and it'll all be rolled into one podcast, and hopefully it will be lovely.
Right. It will.
It will. So anyway, although we were going to start by talking about Jami and unhealthy coping strategies that she has dealt with, we will be doing that probably a little later on. So we'll be adding that to the end. But Gwen, why don't you start out by talking to us about some unhealthy coping strategies that you've heard people talk about?
Right. I think the first thing I wanted to say is the reason that we do them is, first of all, they're habits many times, right? They're comfortable. I mean, if food was your friend before, food's your friend now. If alcohol was your lean-to, it's your lean-to now. So, I think one of the things is that it's a comfort zone, it's a learned behavior.
Yeah.
But what I think kind of scares a lot of bereaved people is maybe shopping or overeating or oversleeping or alcohol was not their go-to before, but they find themselves doing it now, and they worry or become aware like, wow, I never used to do that. And now in my grief, I'm doing it. And I think I just want to acknowledge why we do that. And it's because we don't want to hurt, right?
Yeah.
We want
exactly.
anything to make us feel better. And it's just, if pain is here and I can somehow try to find a way to go over or under, around, it's so much easier than through. So we think.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's very interesting what you said about turning to what you've kind of turned to in the past. Because for me, if I'm having a bad day, let's go out for ice cream. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That'll make me feel a little bit better. It's always been kind of that thing for me. So I think I did that a little bit more in my grief. It's not
Right.
one that I didn't turn to drinking alcohol really, because I did that only very rarely, like when I was out to dinner with friends. And honestly, I probably drank less after Andy died because I never went out to dinner with friends.
Right.
Because that's the only time I was going to do it anyway. So it just it wasn't really something that I thought about doing at home. I mean, I had plenty of other bad habits. Definitely eating was a bad habit, and my sleep was terrible and all of those types of things. But, alcohol wasn't one for me, but I can see why it would be.
It is. And
yeah,
there becomes a couple problems with it. I mean, it does kind of just dull the pain at the beginning. But we're not here to talk about how alcoholism starts. But, one of the things is no one ever plans for it to be a problem. It begins with the plan that it's just a temporary fix right now, and it's just something that makes me feel better. But then many times after a crisis, people come out with another additional problem.
Yeah.
That I'm, relying on alcohol too much. But it is a way that we just think we can go around the pain.
And that's interesting. So Jami is going to talk about her struggles
Mhm.
with alcohol and how that was a coping mechanism that she used and how she's not using that now. And I'll let her tell that story in a bit.
Mhm.
But it was kind of a theme that I got from just talking to some moms who were just talking about this upcoming episode and
Mhm.
how, I think I like the alcohol a little more than I used to. I turn
Mhm.
to it a little more than I used to. After a day of work, it just seemed like an easier thing to do, to sit down
Mhm.
with that glass of wine and to maybe listen to music that would make me sad and cry, right? It's
Mhm.
is just seem you just can fall into a habit. So I had a few people talk to me about that. Another person wrote in saying, I just seem to like it more than I used to like it.
Mhm.
Right? Mhm.
Yeah, the effects of it are appealing because if all day you are heightened to just all the stuff coming at you and something can dull that to the point that you just kind of go, "Oh, I feel a little more relaxed now. I feel a little,
Yeah.
our inhibitions are a little bit lowered." I found a lot of people even during COVID, um, would turn to alcohol because
Mhm.
it was just kind of either, something to do factor or just a stress relief, and, yeah.
Yeah, well, and someone just wrote in now, I've never been a drinker at all, and now I wish I did. I
Yeah,
mean, I could see that. And the
yeah, I
other
can
thing
too.
too is I don't think it's helpful when you look at TV and movies and something really terrible happens. What do they always do on TV?
Pour the
They always
glass.
get drunk. They
Mhm.
always go and they drink too much until
Yeah.
they've almost passed out and whatever. I mean, that's what they show as being a normal response to something horrible
Mhm.
happening. And that's not, I mean, and they don't show it in like a good thing, but they show it in that's totally expected.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right? So I can see why she would write in and say, "Now I wish I did," because
Yeah.
that seems like that's like the thing that you should do, like the
Well,
normal thing.
and if it is something that takes pain away, I can see why someone said, "Man, I wish I did drink because I'd like this
Yeah,
pain
if
to
it
go."
really worked.
Right, yeah, and that's what I meant, "So we think," when I said that,
Right,
because
exactly.
I do think we have to talk about the fact that it it only temporarily helps us avoid that pain, but it never really takes the pain away. We're just trying to, circumvent our way around it, and it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Oh, this is really interesting.
Yeah.
Somebody just wrote in, my husband and I made an agreement not to have alcohol in our house for the first year after our daughter was killed.
Yeah,
Then wrote, unfortunately. But
yeah.
I mean, I think that was a great agreement.
Oh,
And then she wrote, oops.
yeah, but
Yeah,
let
I think I mean, that was really
yeah.
smart. That was a smart decision to just make.
And Jennifer, the person who wrote that in, that's a great segue to what I was gonna say next, because we're talking about what not to do, and people are gonna say, "Well, then what should I do?" Because what we know is people who have an active orientation towards how they're going to grieve,
Uh-huh.
um, go through grief not easy, but easier than people who just sit back and say, "I'll just see what happens," right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
part of that is that active goal-orientated approach.
Oriented. Yeah.
Yeah, oriented, that's the word. Thank you. I was having a mental block,
I know.
as I do with words
Adding an
sometimes.
extra syllable that you didn't need to add.
Thank you.
Yes.
Um, is that's what they did, is they said, "Wait a minute, let's make this a part of our goals is to
Yeah.
say, we're not gonna have this." And so that's kind of what we have to do,
Mhm.
just like a goal would be that moves you closer to your grief is, "I'm gonna go to my support group once a month," or, "I'm going to journal," or, "I'm going to stick
Yeah.
with how I worship even if I don't feel like it," or, "I'm going to make sure so we do make a lot of good choices for ourselves, but it has to be an active decision.
That that does sound very much like Eric and I. First of all, on the
Mhm.
night that Andy died, I remember us saying to each other, "This will not break us," right? "This will
Right.
not break
Yep.
apart our marriage," and we made that kind of vow to each other that day, and then again, with me, I was like, "We're not missing 1 week of church ever," but
Mhm.
because I was so terrified that if I stopped going, I'd never go back.
Back.
So
Yep.
I just, like, like, we can't miss. And
Yep.
the one day I overslept and we missed, it was, almost disaster for me because I was so
Mhm.
just panicked and freaked out that I would never go.
Yep.
It's
So that's what we do. We make decisions to say, well, I don't know what else I'm doing in this, but I'm going to do these few. And you don't have to do all the right things. I
no,
don't want someone to say, oh my goodness, I have to pick all those right things because none of us are perfect. But
no.
if you pick one like Jennifer and her husband did, and you and Eric did to say, hey, we're going to do these few, and this is what we know during this crazy time when our life has just been turned upside down, we're going to stick with some of these things that we know are good for us.
Well, and that's what, that very first week, what was the one thing I decided that I was going to do? And that was call you,
Oh,
Gwen.
yeah.
I was to call you and have that visit at Starlight that day because I didn't know what else to do.
Right.
I had no idea what to do. And like, I just need somebody to help me figure out what the next best thing to do would be. And so
Right.
that was then.
And that is the difference and then just relying on maybe what some of our own comfort habits were, to
Right.
step outside of that and say, I've got to learn about this. I have to know what I'm doing in this. I need someone to guide me. I need all the information. And not every personality is like that. And
No.
sometimes we only learn that after years of poorly managed grief, that we needed a little more information on how to do this better. Right.
Yeah. Mhm.
And sometimes it's a personality thing that drives us to do that. And sometimes, like with you, you had someone who said that you trusted,
Yeah.
make this call, and it was easier. Some people, they don't have anyone, they're just left figuring it out on their own.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't want
Yeah.
people to beat themselves up because you didn't even know what to do.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
Jennifer just wrote back, "And your brain is in a fog and it's hard to think."
Right.
Absolutely, it's in a fog.
Yeah.
You can't at all think. I mean,
Mhm.
every decision seems about impossible, right?
Yeah.
So, of course, you make decisions like thinking this, for me, this bowl of ice cream seems like a really good idea, right?
Right. Yes. Well, and
And I think too, just not I know for me, I just felt like I didn't really wanna take care of my body right now.
Mhm,
I didn't want to. Like,
mhm,
death seems like not such a bad thing. So,
mhm. Yeah.
working
Why
out and
why
eating
lengthen my
right and
life?
all of this, why lengthen it?
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Let's just let it
That
all
sounds like a
go.
ridiculous thing to do. Mhm,
I know it doesn't make sense, but in
mhm.
your brain, in the fogginess of your mind, it just
Yeah.
doesn't seem like any of that is worth it, is worth
Well,
the effort.
yeah, and sometimes the gauge on how we know we're feeling better or making some steps, in a direction of, healing, or whatever word we wanna use. I don't wanna offend anyone. I mean, we never completely heal, I know
No,
that.
no, yeah.
Um, but those steps is when we do start thinking like you did not too long ago, "Hey, I wanna take a little better care of myself. I
Right.
want to get this under control." So that is kind of something that people can look at and go, "Oh, I must be feeling better because I am thinking
Yeah.
about these things now." But I think we've talked about alcohol and we've talked about eating, but long before there was Amazon, I've been doing this for 36 years, there was QVC. And
Mhm.
some people still shop it, but I would go to homes, and in the doorway, in the house was just, um, boxes and boxes. And I remember
Yeah.
one man whose wife had died said to me, um, "It's the only thing that makes me feel good." And I've had other people who shop and shop and then go on a day and return everything because they couldn't afford what they had, but they got the good feeling of buying it.
Oh, that's interesting.
I mean, I've seen a lot of different things that people do, in the buying, and just if we surround ourselves, or the other part is, um, you know, gifting, just buying
Mm.
for others, and just kinda, I don't care about my own money or my own bills.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, we've got a few other comments written in
Right.
here too. Just validated that I'm not crazy and that I don't care about living too. Yeah,
Yeah, to
I
old age,
totally get
yeah.
that. Yeah, to old age. Yeah.
Yep.
And then Cynthia wrote in, "I feel guilty when I realized I started
Yes.
doing things again." That's
Yes.
absolutely true.
100%, and then it's like, I'm dishonoring or not being loyal,
Mhm.
or, and that that's the part where I really think when we find a way to keep our child's memory alive, or we keep them in our family and conversations, that then we have places for them, and it's okay that we have places where we are doing things for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and we
Mhm.
had Demetra write obsessive shopping that would buy anything that reminded her of her daughter Eleni.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I can see that.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Um, okay. Oh, and
Yeah,
then the other thing too, somebody wrote in the thing was trying to control everything because she couldn't
yes,
control things that had happened to her their daughter. That's a really good one. I like
that
that one a
is.
lot.
Yep.
And I feel that way too. Always wanting to be in control than when you
Mhm.
really weren't. Oh,
Yeah.
and now Robin just wrote in. I was excited to see Jami join you ladies today because she's been joining Jami in the Angel Mom Circle. Great way to talk to other moms who are struggling after losing a child. Okay, so
Mhm.
Jamie's fitforlife.com. She's advertising for Jami, but Jami will
Right.
be on when this is rebroadcast on Thursday. She will be on. This is only this awful storm that is holding her out today.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but anyway, back
Um,
to that control thing. That is a big.
oh, it
Mm,
is. And, when we can control our schedule, we can control what we do, we can control what we buy, we can, um, whatever it is that gives us that sense of control, because everything else was out of our control.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I was going to write or read too. So, someone had written in. Unhealthy coping mechanism that I have used in my whole life is being very busy in order to numb feelings that I'm afraid to feel. I also think that hanging on to mistrust of God is easier than choosing what I know to be true a lot of times. So both of those things I thought were really valuable on just thinking like I just need to keep myself busy enough. And I hear that a
Mhm.
lot from people. Like
Yes.
I just need to keep busy because you feel like when you're not, then your mind wanders
All the
to the
thoughts. Yep.
grief, and which is what it needs to do, right? Your mind
Mhm.
goes there
It
because it
does.
needs to go there. It needs to think through this and work through this. So if you get yourself so busy and so distracted, now you've just taken away some of the grief work that really has to happen.
Yes. And a lot of people tell us to stay busy, and they want us to
Yes.
stay busy. So our friends might not know how to help us confront our grief, but they're sure darn good at distracting us from it. Like,
Right.
that's the one thing they've got really good. Like, oh, let's just keep them busy and let's keep their mind off of it. And
Yeah, let's do
um,
this, let's do that.
mhm.
I
Yeah.
know I had a group of friends. I mean, which this wasn't a bad thing. They were always in communication with each other, which who was talking to me, right?
Mhm.
And just making sure that I'm doing, that I was doing something
Mhm.
because they didn't want me just sitting in bed and crying all day, which I get, and they were all worried about me. But there are times when you kind of do need to cry all day, and that's
Well, we
okay too.
do. And I
Yeah,
think what we wanna just really, and Jennifer said it here, and I say this all the time, our counselor always says, would tell her that she needed to feel to heal. She hated it,
yeah,
but it's true, because the only feelings that don't heal, I always say, are the ones that we hide. And so, um, we need to confront that pain. Um, oh, I had a thought with something you just said about friends keeping us busy. Um but that balance of having time to do the grief work, and then it is okay if we distract ourselves, but we have to make sure it's something we can afford, it's something that our body can afford, that's not harming our
yeah,
body, and those types of things. But, um, yeah, I
yeah.
had a thought, but
Well, I want to move on and talk a little bit about that hanging on to the mistrust
oh,
of
yeah.
God in your faith. I had never thought of it in that way before because I definitely thought like I need to get my trust back. I've lost my trust. But I didn't think about it in the way of no, I'm hanging on to my mistrust. I'm not like I haven't lost my trust. I'm hanging on to mistrust, which is a different way of thinking about it. Because
Mhm,
I'm hanging on to this sense that I still want to be in control and not trust anymore. So
mhm.
that's the thing to try to let go of. But in some ways it's a coping strategy, right? To think
Yes.
that I can control it, and
Mhm.
it's me that's doing it, and not just trusting that sometimes you can't.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think everything in grief is a process.
Yeah.
It is a learning process. It's a step by step. There's no fell swoop way to grieve. There's no event. There's no button to click. There's no pill to take. These are, small, when we're ready, times to confront our pain and allow ourselves some time to do the hard work of grief, because um, nothing short of that helps us, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and Marcy just wrote in here again. What do you do when your friends shy away because they don't want to hear you talk about your child?
My first gut response was, Mercy, get new
What?
friends.
That's mine too. And which is so sad and so not
I
easy to do,
know,
but it's sort of kind
because
of
they're not
ends
gonna
up
get
having to
it.
be what you do. I
Yeah,
mean, why do I have my virtual support
yeah,
group of friends? Because I
but
can talk about Andy all the time to them. I
right.
mean, there are
Yeah,
people. Demetra is on the live stream right now. She's one that I can send her a message anytime and
yeah,
talk about Andy. And she can
mhm,
send me a message anytime and talk about Eleni. And neither one of us are ever going to get tired of it. And
right.
that's really important for us to have that for each
Yes,
other. And
it
yeah,
is.
I mean, that's the problem. There are friends that I have that I can't talk about Andy.
Mhm,
And it makes me
yeah,
sad. And it also means that we're not the friends that we used to be.
right. It reminds me of a poem I use a lot at the holidays, and it was written in the, Bereavement magazine years ago, and it's, "Can I talk about them and not have you shy away from me?" And so sometimes we have to
Yeah.
say to our friends, um is,
Yeah.
"Hey, when you shy away from me, that makes I need you to be in there," because sometimes they don't know, right? And
Yeah.
it's an uncomfortableness, so we just have to maybe ask those questions. But now she says, "That's what I need to do, is find a friend like that," and we
Yeah.
all do. This is a great circle, as you mentioned, some of the virtual groups, and if moms just wanna I don't know where this person lives, I don't know anything about them, but from some of your listeners that just a few moms in a few areas just get together. Let's meet at the library.
Yes.
Let's, even if it's just two people that meet and can just talk around those things, right? And just
Yeah.
talk about their kids. It doesn't have to be a huge group that's all super organized and has a curriculum. Just
No.
another soul that you can connect with that allows you to be where you need to be.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and one of the
And I
big
think I
things,
like what you said too about just, saying being kind of honest that I
yeah,
need to do that.
right.
I need to be able to talk about
Yeah,
Andy. I need to be able to talk about Eleni. I need to be able to talk about your child's name and just
right.
kind of say that. And if that makes you uncomfortable, okay, you can let me know, and then I can do that with someone else. But I need that,
Right,
you
and
know?
sometimes they don't know that you need that, but just saying, "Can you just not run away from me when I mention it? It makes me
Yeah.
feel good and to talk about it."
Well, it's interesting. Last week's guest had a really good friend that she like went to lunch with and was talking about her son. And then she seemed to like just disappear. And she found out months later she had moved. She'd totally moved.
Oh
And she
my
had no idea.
word.
And she ended up sending her a letter. And then she got a letter back like, yeah, I just
Yeah,
really didn't know how to handle your grief. I couldn't,
right.
like, that's
We do
crazy to
have
me.
people that do walk away from us for sure, and then there's another thing. I mean, today we're talking about poor coping skills. So if your friends and your people shy away from you, no wonder why a glass of wine seems great. No wonder why
Yeah.
a nice double scoop of mint chocolate chip ice cream, because they don't shy away. They're
Yeah.
always there. They're waiting. You can get another bowl if you want, get another glass of wine. So that's really sad.
It is
But
really
that's
sad,
what
but you're right. It's
happens.
always there. So
Yeah.
it
And so when
seems
I
more
can't,
reliable than people.
yes,
And
because
obviously it
this,
ends up can lead to other
right.
issues,
This, it
like
does.
me
And
gaining 35 pounds. I
right.
mean, you
This
know.
I oh yeah, my college roommate died. I gained a lot of weight. Um
I mean, that's what happens.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, and I
Um,
think for some of us, it's our entertainment too. It's we don't maybe
yeah.
do other activities, so going out to dinner is, um, yeah, it is sad that we do lose and gain some friends from this tragedy. And I just want to say, because I don't just work with bereaved moms, I work with all types of losses. This is across the board. It's not just moms who maybe your other friends like think, oh, if it can happen to your child, it can happen to mine. It's the same way with a husband. It's the same way with other, like, oh man, it's too close to me. And people lose friends all across the board.
Yeah, it's very sad. It is very
Mhm.
sad.
Now, before you and I have to, leave some space for you to add Jamie's story in today, um, we had some listeners write in some really good, healthy things they do, and I think we want to give some of those.
I want to read Carolyn, who wrote in with some grief do's and don'ts, which
Yeah,
I thought were fantastic.
yeah.
So we're going to do that first. So I'm going to do that. Grief do: eat three square healthy meals daily, drink water, limit alcohol. Grief don't forget to eat or eat too much. Don't drink alcohol in place of water or to relax or numb the pain. Grief do: write in a grief journal and grateful journal. Set time aside weekly for your grief. Be honest when you are overwhelmed by your grief and take steps to find a healthy path. Be mindful of your feelings. Grief don't: hold in your feelings, avoid your feelings, eat too much, drink too much, sleep less because you're overwhelmed and consumed by your grief. Grief do: walk in nature, collect rocks or wade in water, exercise daily. Grief don't: stay inside and avoid going outside. Grief do: get your hair done, take a leisurely bath, pay attention to your clothing. Grief don't: ignore washing daily, let your hair go, live in sweats. Grief do: find a grief support group or books to help you understand your grief and help you on your journey. Grief don't: rely on yourself with no new tools. Avoid
Mhm.
people like it's because it's too painful. I
Yeah,
loved all of those.
I
Those were
do.
all
And you know
so
what I
good.
loved about it is because, even the part about don't let your hair go, don't live in sweats, a lot, and this is a whole nother topic, but grief and depression go hand in hand. They're like what my
Yes, for
mom used
sure.
to call kissing cousins. And so when we look at some ways that people rise above or overcome depression, we say get outside, breathe,
Yeah,
change
yeah.
your clothes, wash your hair. And so some of this really does help in our grief too, because grief and depression are very close. Now the depression that comes with grief is not the same as other types of depression. It's usually, dissipates over time, but it's there at the beginning, very strong.
Yeah. And it feels so much the same at
So
the beginning.
much the same.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing, we're not going to be able to talk about all of this because it's fantastic,
It
but
is.
I have got to tell you about going to a journeyforcaleb.org. So this is
Mhm.
written by my dear friend Chrissy, who's been on the podcast twice, but she wrote in my ABCs of coping with and moving through trauma and grief, a journey through Caleb. And she went through the alphabet
Oh,
A through Z
it's so
with
good.
it's so incredibly good. So I just invite you. She wrote this back on February 9th 2021. So a long time ago. But gosh, you have got to read this. But I wanted to
Mhm.
go over some of my favorites. Did you have some favorites that you wanted to talk about,
I do
Gwen?
have something I wanna that she
Yeah.
said before she got in the ABCs that I wanna
Yeah.
point out.
Even before
But
that. Yeah. The first
yeah.
couple paragraphs are even
Mhm.
fantastic. Go ahead.
Oh, well, mine is basically what she says at the very end is coping is a choice and a process. And I had said that earlier that again, we don't want the listeners to be so overwhelmed that they have to wake up tomorrow and do all these good things, right? Um,
hmm
but it's a process. It's like I'm going to chip away at this. I'm going to, be 1% better. I'm going to just pick a couple things that I can work on that are good choices for me that I can control when everything else is out of control. And so I loved that it's a choice. And so we can make a choice to not deal with our pain and go down the path of least resistance and do some unhealthy things, or we can make a choice and put that into something productive like the ones she mentioned. So what are your favorites?
So I've got some that I wanted to point out. One was grieve, and her saying grieve is a verb, an action, an
Mhm.
outward expression of inner pain. So I love thinking about that and reminding yourself that when you're grieving, it's a verb, it's something active that you are doing. So I feel like that's really important. And then Q was one that jumped out at me. I don't know if you remember what that one is. Question myself. Is this hurting me or helping me? Ah, That one was great
Mhm.
because if you start asking yourself when you're doing something, is this really helping or is this hurting? And you can answer that question and go, nope, I think it's helping. Okay, let's keep doing it.
Mhm.
Actually, I
Mhm.
think this might be hurting me. Okay, let's think about something that we could do instead. So I I just love that. I look
Mhm.
like sometimes I'm able to just saying sometimes I'm able to do it. So I look at a container of dirty clothes and say, I don't think I need to do this tonight. Is this helping me or hurting me? Like today, it's hurting me to do a load of laundry. Tomorrow, it might help me to do a load of laundry. So if you can start asking those questions before you do anything, just love that. Love,
Mhm.
love, love that. So
Well,
anyway, I think honestly, every one of them I got something from. So I really would
right.
go through. T was amazing too because T is talk about Caleb. If you know me personally and we're involved in each other's day-to-day life, you know that I talk about Caleb all the time. So talk about him. So that's another one that we had
Yeah.
kind of touched on before, but they're
I mean,
beautiful, beautiful.
and not only do her words and the suggestions, but she also gives some tools. Like P was for podcasts, so she mentions yours and another podcast. The C one was like a calming app.
Calm. The
Yeah.
calm app.
So I mean, I would just encourage everyone to look at them because there's 26 of them and they're really good suggestions. And just pick one because Kristen says here, make one thing a daily ritual and build on that. So I guess our
Exactly right.
challenge would be, if you're looking at your coping skills and you're listening to this and you don't necessarily have ones that are particularly bad, but you want to hone in on good ones,
Yeah.
read through
Yeah.
these. They're
Yeah,
so
read through
good.
these. Yeah, so and someone just asked again, it's not a name of a book. This is just her blog. This is a
Right.
journeyforcaleb.org. So this is just Chrissy's blog and this was the blog post from February 2021. So you can go all the way back to that.
Right.
And Chrissy's on. Yay,
Oh,
Chrissy.
no, thank
Uh
you. She says,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
because that yeah, she wrote thank you. No, thank you, honey, because she sent me that today. Which what a little God thing to send me that today because we lose Jami to a storm, and now we're going to have to kind of flail around to get through because Jami was the main
Right.
topic today, and to
Well,
have Chrissy write that in, I mean, wow, that was pretty helpful.
and at the risk of sounding like a broken record, because I feel like I say this a lot, but one of the things is that Jamie's going to put herself in a vulnerable spot to
Yeah,
share, some poor decisions and maybe some things that didn't help her. That takes a lot of bravery too. But
yeah.
just think of, all the people she's going to help. And so I'm so excited that she took that brave step and said, I'm
It
willing to tell about my story.
Right,
Um,
because I mean, not a lot of people were willing to do that. We had
no,
a few people write in, and we had
yeah,
some discussions around alcohol. But it's a vulnerable place to go to
right.
admit what kind
Yeah.
of that you
Well,
didn't do the right things,
and then
and what you're doing now to try to change it.
right. And that's my other thing that I feel like I say all the time. Every one of your listeners are brave. And the reason I know they're brave is because they're still breathing and they're getting up every day
Yep.
and living that day, knowing that that day has more pain in it. So everyone here is wearing some sense of bravery. And I don't think they know that. And I just want to keep speaking that into their lives, that getting up and doing your best every day when it's another day of pain without your child.
Yeah.
Huge.
And if some of those days you're just in your sweats and you don't wash your hair, okay. But as long as
Exactly.
if you do it sometimes,
Yeah, you're breathing in and out.
yeah.
Sometimes that's the biggest accomplishment, and I think we have to remember that too, that it's
Oh,
not
and
so
so
much.
Chrissy wrote in on Facebook. If you go to the Facebook page, you can see the link. So she wrote in the comments her link, a journeyforcaleb.org/my ABCs of coping. That's the actual blog post if you want to read them all, which I
Right.
actually do recommend
Yeah.
everybody read them
Well,
all
I'm
because they
starting
were
to think,
fantastic.
man, I'm gonna reach out to her and ask her permission. This is something I'd love to see as a handout that I can add to my packet of the materials that I give to people. It's just awesome.
Yeah, it's really, really
Yeah.
good. Well, we'll see if
Okay.
she gives you permission there, Gwen.
Yeah.
Um, well, I don't know. Is there anything else you want to make sure to talk about? Because I do want to
I
make sure that I give
yeah.
enough time to Jami here
I do too.
when
I
we
do too, because she's gonna take that brave step, and I think the listeners will get a lot from that.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you, Gwen. And
Well, thank
now,
you.
if you are not listening live, we'll be going straight on to the Jami portion. And if you are listening live, you'll have to wait another couple days and go to your favorite podcast player on Thursday, just like normal. And around 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, there'll be the podcast, and it should have Jami all on it as well. So
Mhm.
thank you. Thank you, Gwen.
All right. Take care, everyone.